Marking the series' 20th anniversary, a tale of souls and swords is retold once more in SOULCALIBUR 6. Reprising the cast of the original SOULCALIBUR, it positions itself as something of a successor to the Dreamcast classic. Beyond the roster though, the difference between the two games is huge. After all, we have 2 decades worth of moveset changes, added mechanics and technical upgrades to factor in. Bandai Namco's efforts today are, of course, based on an entirely different engine too, with the move to Unreal Engine 4. Like Tekken 7, it gives the team scope to push for more effects and shaders than we'd ever thought possible back in 1998. The original SOULCALIBUR was groundbreaking for its time. Even today, it holds up. The controls feel crisp and responsive, and the motion captured animations still blend fluidly from one to the next. As the follow-up to Soul Edge on PlayStation 1, the main progression here was having all the action run at 60 frames per second on console. Bearing in mind we had to play many of Namco's fighters at 30 FPS on restricted hardware, it was a big deal to double the refresh, to match what was possible in the arcades. SOULCALIBUR 6 carries on that tradition, and locks constantly to 60 FPS. Regardless of whether it's PS4, Xbox One or the Pro or X enhanced machines, the action updates at 16.7 milliseconds per frame, a crucial tenet of any serious fighter. The main question then is, how does the game scale across all 4? Let's start with the best case. The Xbox One X footage here is in most respects the PC version running at max settings. On an Ultra HD TV though, the resolution isn't exactly a full 4K. Rather, you're getting a native 2560 by 1440 upscaled. There's no hint of dynamic res scaling, but it does hold up reasonably well even so. Just expect more shimmer on specular highlights. The anti-aliasing for its part is effective overall, and matches what we're seeing on PC's best settings. For perspective, let's rein in the PC version now. This is running at a genuine 4K at 3840 by 2160 on an Nvidia Titan GPU, the Maxwell version, which is broadly equivalent to a GTX 1070. Now the footage does look undeniably crisp, but the problem? Well, PC settings are all maxed out, and clearly there are framerate drops under 60. Our Titan can't handle absolute max at 4K. With VSync enabled, you get jumps between 30 and 60 FPS. Also, since the game speed is tied to the frame rate, you're literally playing at half speed at times, desyncing the video with audio whenever you see a drop. Now disabling VSync prevents this, but you end up with heavy tearing artifacts instead, which isn't ideal. Fortunately, the PC menu gives you tools to work around it. Our Titan is just an example, but if you're having troubles with your GPU, the resolution scaling feature here gives you an easy option to solve it. Memory bandwidth contention while pushing 4K on our Titan is a problem, and so even dropping this to 80%, making it a native 3072 by 1728 fixes it. Your mileage may vary based on card, and overclocking to core and memory clocks. Regardless, 60 FPS is an absolute must, and this res scaling slider should be your first port of call. The comparisons with Xbox One X's 1440p image show it's easily the best way to play the game, even if you have to tuck that resolution down a bit from 4K. On console, the situation is a bit clearer. Xbox One X is feature-rich, boasting that strong depth of field effect in the background with some of the best post-processing features PC has to offer. This includes bloom and even a high-quality ambient occlusion too, which isn't the case for the base Xbox One. To put that into perspective, here's the original Xbox One running solo, and you can see how drastically image quality takes a hit. Does it look blurrier? Well, yes. In terms of the resolution, you're getting just a 1280 by 720 image from the console, and in the main, all settings are much closer to PC's lowest presets. So, comparing the extremes, here's the vanilla Xbox One again, stacked up against the X model. This is using the game's replay footage, where I've plucked some highlights from the online competitive scene, a database common to both machines. This way, we get an exact match in the inputs to each player in a game, but the rendering of the scene is very different. First off, it's 720p on the base model versus 1440p on X, making it a quadrupling in output pixels from the machine on right. It's possible anti-aliasing quality also takes a hit with the regular Xbox One, but the bottom line is, image quality is radically different between the two. Up close and slowing this footage down to 33% speed, you can see most other elements are quite similar. SOULCALIBUR 6 pushes heavily on effects for guard reversals and charged attacks, bursts of fire and lightning that punctuate each hit. The results on a base Xbox One match the quality on X, the main difference being they're viewed through a lower resolution window. The net result is the further away the dueling characters, the less distinct these transparency effects become. But fundamentally, Bandai Namco have kept the same quality assets in place. Textures are a different issue. Again, the materials on clothing and normal mapping across stages are identical between Xbox One and X. However, the texture quality setting on PC primarily affects the filtering, and so here, X essentially gets 16 times anisotropic filtering, compared to a lower preset on the regular Xbox One. It means up close or viewed dead on, a texture looks the same between the two. At an angle though, well, detail level trails off sharply on Xbox One, and that filtering cascade blurs fine details over. Along with the 720p resolution, this really sticks out. It only serves to muddy the image more, especially given the camera frames the stage at a fixed side angle, which makes it all the more obvious. Shadow quality is also a major sticking point. You can't help but notice character shadows are not only lower resolution on Xbox One, but also unfiltered up close. This means character intros show heavy pixelation on self-shadowing, while X gets away with a crisp outline. Fortunately, quality is based on the same logic as texture filtering, and once the match kicks off, Xbox One tends to produce better looking, sharper outlines on the ground itself. It's simply a byproduct of the filtering quality, similar to the texturing, which means you get rougher results nearer the camera. On top of that, ambient occlusion is dialed back significantly on Xbox One, giving it a much lighter appearance compared to all other versions. But what about PS4 and PS4 Pro? As you'd expect, these sit in between the Xbox One consoles in terms of quality. Looking at base PS4 first, you're getting a 1600 by 900 picture, and with better texture filtering and shadows too. There is some sign of low-res shadows on characters, but the filtering is much improved, so you rarely catch its ugly side. Ambient occlusion also gets an increase here compared to base Xbox One. Meanwhile, PS4 Pro sees another step up. In this case, it's 1920 by 1080, slotting in directly behind Xbox One X in clarity. Again, expect the next rung up in shadow quality and texture filtering here. Let's go through each in turn then. Zooming into Xbox One, it's a blurry 720p image, improved with PS4's 900p and better filtering and shadows, and again PS4 Pro's 1080p image, and once more for the Xbox One X at 1440p with the best shadows. While it's disappointing to only get 1080p from PS4 Pro, you're still getting most of Xbox One X's top features. For example, post effects are pushed to PC's high quality settings on both. Each enhanced machine adds a unique bloom around the statues on the Shrine of Eurydice stage, for example. This bloom is not available on the base consoles at all, and represents a neat extra. All played side by side, they each run well at 60 FPS. I've slowed the footage down just to make the comparison easy to follow, but the gameplay ticks along on each with only the occasional hiccup. Mainly you'll notice a stutter when the scene cuts from the finishing blow to the victory animation. It never intrudes on gameplay mid-flow, it's just a small quirk of the engine. Even the base Xbox One comes through unscathed with a full 60 FPS lock. For all the cutbacks, in shadows, ambient occlusion and that 720p resolution, it does at least pay off in a locked 60 FPS line. This goes for the PS4, the Pro model and X. In every case, the settings match the spec, insofar as there's always GPU headroom to lock at 60. One point that does surprise me is those small hitches between big moves. You get a spike of duplicate frames like this even on Xbox One X, for example, but in my experience it doesn't happen on a base Xbox One. I've scanned thousands of frames worth of footage in through our tools, and the stutters occasionally seen on other machines just don't appear on this one. In theory, it's possible the pruning back of settings is excessive on the base model, giving Xbox One the wiggle room needed to avoid the issue entirely. Either way, it's rare for me to say. The weaker contender in a face-off is getting away with marginally smoother performance. It might just be the case this time, but of course it isn't a major issue on the other consoles. Armed with Unreal Engine 4, SOULCALIBUR 6 follows the tradition of many fighters this generation, revitalizing a series on an entirely new technical platform. Tekken 7 already set a strong precedent with the UE4, but here the learning takes another step. It's the series at its most excessive, a world away from the simplicity of the original game 2 decades ago, and every move bombards the screen with effects. For my tastes, I still have a preference for the clean, straightforward design of the original. It was a time before the special moves, the slow motion reversal guards, and bursts of fire that come with each impact. It's well worth revisiting the first game if you haven't, ideally on Xbox One's back and pat. But today, SOULCALIBUR 6 is still an impressive showcase for Epic's engine. For better or worse, both in terms of its mechanics and its visual design, the series has never been more complex. But that's all from me today. If you did enjoy this analysis, feel free to like or subscribe. And don't forget to hit the bell to get notifications as each video lands. For the source file to this video, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net. And to get in direct contact, just use Twitter. But until next time, thanks for watching.
To see what is right and not to do it is want of courage.